Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Anu Sood, and I'm the Director of Marketing at Caseware RCM, and today's moderator. This is the last webinar for our 2020 season, and I hope you will enjoy it. So today's webinar is on how to comply with FinCEN's rules for virtual currencies. Now, specifically, we're going to be looking at FinCEN's rules for banks when it comes to virtual currency actors and transactions, red flag and money laundering typologies for virtual currencies that are worth noting, and a few case studies that illustrate some of the compliance pitfalls for banks and how they can overcome them and comply with regulations. Now, I think you're going to be excited about today's presenter. Today's presenter is Dave Jevans, and he's the founder and CEO of CipherTrace. Now, as a serial entrepreneur and industry expert on blockchain security, internet fraud, and cybersecurity, Dave has advised Congress on these topics and is frequently quoted by the media, including American Banker, Bloomberg TV, CIO Magazine, and the Washington Post. He also frequently speaks at events around the world on the blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and electronic crime. And when in his spare time, Dave is also the founder and chairman of APWG.org, a security nonprofit with over 1,500 corporate and government members that produces the Electronic Crime Symposium, bringing cutting-edge research from emerging PhD students to a global stage. APWG also operates the eCrime Exchange, a real-time data exchange for sharing phishing, malicious IPs, and criminal cryptocurrency addresses. So that is just a small sample of some of the things that Dave has done. You'll also see some information on the slide. So Dave brings a lot of experience to today's presentation, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Dave.
Thanks very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'd like to go through what we're going to focus on for today's discussion and a couple of things that you can expect to get out of the presentation. So we're going to focus on regulatory obligations for banks and other financial institutions as it regards to monitoring risks and transactions related to virtual assets. So that's cryptocurrency, digital assets, ICO payments that may be going through your financial institution. We're going to have a quick look at how CipherTrace and the Alessa solution can help you monitor and mitigate those risks. What we're not going to do today, and we'll save it for a future webinar for next season, is we're not going to teach you how to take on cryptocurrency companies as banking clients. And we're not going to talk about how you could provide digital asset custody services to your customers, which is something that the OCC has now cleared for all US banks. Those will be topics for future focused discussions. So we'll focus more today on your regulatory obligations under FinCEN and IRS, depending who is your regulator, and risk mitigations, case studies, etc. Just a brief note on CipherTrace. We are a regulatory compliance and financial crime prevention company. We focus on cryptocurrency and virtual currencies. Our customers are banks, payment processors, regulators, and other government agencies, as well as cryptocurrency exchanges. And we have customers all around the world. We're based in the United States, in the San Francisco Bay Area, with offices around the country. Up in Canada, we have offices in Europe, South America, and Asia as well. So here is the agenda for the next hour. We will go over what the FinCEN regulations and their guidance is. We'll talk about how you can comply with it. I'm going to give you a couple of different case studies, and then how you can use the intelligence that can be provided from CipherTrace through the Alessa product to do compliance. And then we'll take questions at the end. So we'll leave plenty of time for your questions. So at any time when you think about them, you can enter them into the questions box, and then we will answer them at the conclusion of the prepared discussions. So don't be shy. There's no dumb questions. The cryptocurrency and virtual currency markets are complex, changing very, very quickly, and the regulations and the regulatory stance and enforcement stance is changing very, very quickly as well. So just as a quick update on the status of virtual currencies and the market, CipherTrace researchers found that last year in 2019, just about 1.3 trillion US dollars of cryptocurrency payments were made between individuals. So these are not people trading crypto on an exchange, buying and selling different cryptos. This is people actually sending virtual currencies to other people. If you think about it, it took 50 years for the credit card industry to go from $0 a year to about 20 trillion, between 15 and 20 trillion a year. That's the entire credit card industry of all credit cards. It took cryptocurrencies 10 years to go from 0 to 1.3 trillion. We think it'll be double for 2020 once we finish the year. So the growth rate of virtual currencies as a payment mechanism between individuals is growing phenomenally. And if you think about the market capitalization of all cryptocurrencies, it's around $500 billion right now. So, it's a not insignificant asset class, and it's really starting to get entangled with banks. And I think the important point to note here is that all virtual currency at some point starts with a bank and ends with a bank. This is because people have to pay for them to purchase them. So they've got to get cash somewhere, whether it's US dollars or euros or yen, to be able to purchase cryptocurrency. So they do that through credit cards, wire transfers, or ACH transactions. And at the end of the day, when you want to cash out, you have to move it into what we call fiat currency, which would again be, for example, take your Bitcoin, sell it, and convert it into US dollars or euros. That again is typically done through an account at a bank where you cash it out at an exchange and they send a wire to your bank, to your account. So that's one important thing to remember, is the valuation of all of these cryptocurrencies is really defined by the endpoints, which are how you get in and out of the traditional payment system. So I'd like to start with some terminology. There's going to be some terms thrown around today that you may not be familiar with. Let's start with one of the mouthfuls here, which is a VASP. This is a term that has been largely defined by the regulatory community over the last 12 to 18 months. What it means is a virtual asset service provider. So this is effectively a catch-all for any business that facilitates cryptocurrency or digital asset transactions, buying, selling, ICOs, trading, swapping from one currency to another, on-ramps such as credit card processors that are basically letting you use your credit cards to purchase cryptocurrencies. So it's anybody of that nature. So it's kind of an ugly term, VASP, but it's what the regulators are really focused on, and it's a very broad. So if you think about a cryptocurrency exchange, you may have heard of Coinbase or Binance or Kraken or Bittrex. These would all be considered VASPs. So when you read the regulations that are going to apply to our industry and the banking industry, you'll see variously VC or CVC. What this simply means is virtual currency, and some agencies refer to them as convertible virtual currencies, which means it's convertible into the US dollar through one of these VASPs, for example. Now, this is a little trickier one. So a P2P transaction or a non-custodial wallet. You'll see this in the literature as well. So there are two types of what we call wallets or addresses that hold your cryptocurrency. One is more like what you'd be familiar with a bank account or your stock trading or 401k account, which is what we call a custodial wallet. So this means you have an account at a company. So think about an account at Fidelity or at your bank. You have an account number, you have a name, they know who you are, they've done some KYC, so know your customer verification. That would be a custodial wallet. So these are places that hold your crypto for you. You log in with a name and password, and it looks like a bank account or a stock trading account. A non-custodial wallet is one you manage yourself. So that is one of the differences of cryptocurrencies versus the banking system, is you can hold your own account keys yourself. So you can have software apps that run on your iPhone or Android that you can load up and store Bitcoins or Ethereum or other cryptos on it. You could have one on your Linux computer, your Macintosh. So these are called non-custodial wallets. There are hardware devices that plug into computers to manage the keys that store your accounts and your money. So you're literally managing your own money there. It's almost like having electronic cash on your device. Now, a P2P transaction or peer-to-peer transaction means, let's say I want to send you money from my iPhone and it's going to go to your Android device. If you give me the address, I can send it to you, and it'll get there in a few minutes with very, very low cost, and it'll show up on your phone. And that's sent directly from me to you with no intermediary. There's no central party. There's no switch. It didn't go through SWIFT. It didn't go through the ACH network. It just was sent directly from me to you over one of these cryptocurrency or virtual currency protocols like Bitcoin or Ethereum or some of the stable coins out there. Okay? So you'll see this in the literature. Of course, it's a lot easier to provide regulations on custodial wallets because they're companies with addresses, boards of directors, they're domiciled in countries, they have to follow FinCEN regulations, etc. A couple of other terms, and then we'll move on. So an AEC, you'll see this cropping up more and more. This is an anonymity enhanced cryptocurrency. So currencies like Bitcoin that you may have heard of, or Ethereum, or many of the derivatives of Ethereum, there's about a couple thousand of different currencies out there, can largely be traced to see who sent the money to whom. But there is a class of these anonymity enhanced cryptocurrencies. The most effective one is Monero, which is extremely difficult to trace. And this does cause some concern in the regulatory enforcement community if people are able to, in a very highly anonymous way, move transactions around such that law enforcement can't tell at the end of the day where it was sent to or from. This is a problem. So you'll see this coming up more and more in the literature and regulations. Exchanges, these are those companies like, as I mentioned, Coinbase or Bittrex or eToro that allow you to buy and sell crypto from your bank account. You can fund it with a credit card, a wire transfer. They can do an ACH debit from your account. So exchanges, I would say, PayPal is verging on being one. As you may know, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, PayPal added cryptocurrency capabilities. You can now purchase and sell cryptocurrencies on your PayPal account. So that's opened up crypto to more than 100 million people, and they will be expanding that worldwide. Then the last term that you're probably going to hear a lot about is DeFi or DEXs. So this is decentralized finance. These are new companies or projects that have really started to catch fire over the last 4 months, since July or August of this year. These are trading platforms that allow you to effectively buy and sell and trade crypto with other people. They run a market screen, so it looks like, if you logged into your Schwab account or an E-Trade account or something like that, you can see the prices in real time, bid, ask. place orders. The bad news about these platforms is almost all of them have no KYC or anti-money laundering controls. And as you can imagine, that's going to cause quite some concern in the regulatory space. So let's look at what FinCEN in the United States says. At CipherTrace, we work very closely with regulators all around the world. We meet with FinCEN on a monthly basis. We meet with the SEC, the CFTC, the IRS. Many of these agencies are our customers as well of CipherTrace, using it to perform monitoring of these crypto markets. But we also work internationally with regulators in many countries, and also with a group called the Financial Action Task Force, or FATF, FATF, which is a group of 190 regulators that focus on anti-money laundering and know your customer regulations, counter-terrorist financing regulations. The U.S. through FinCEN has been one of the leaders in the virtual asset working group at the FATF, and they're working to harmonize virtual asset regulations across the 190 companies that participate in FATF. So the director of FinCEN, Kenneth Blanco, has made a pretty, clear statement here that, in his view, the emergence of virtual currencies is no different from the emergence of other payment systems, money service providers, money service businesses. They fall largely under the same regulations that apply to money service businesses, and that on the banking side, your obligations for tracking those transactions, whether you bank the crypto company or your customers are doing those transactions, you need to be able to provide the same level of tracking, detection, filing of suspicious activity reports if your customers are involved in cryptocurrency transactions or offshore transactions involving cryptocurrencies. And you're going to get audited as well. So we were speaking with the OCC yesterday and a number of their examiners. There's, of course, quite a bit of concern and movement there. FinCEN's been very clear about what you have to do. And I think you'll start to see, probably as the FFIEC guidelines get updated, more specific guidance for you there. So BSA obligations, they apply to all types of transactions. Those could be, they could be wire transfers coming in and out from your customers. They could be walk-up cash deposits. They could be credit card payments. So what's important here is you have to understand if your customer is operating as a money service business. So how do I know if my customer is actually operating as an MSB, as a crypto front, as an unlicensed MSB, or is my customer making suspicious transactions with, for example, an offshore money service business that is servicing U.S. customers but is not registered with FinCEN, which would be a violation, especially if you find an MSB that has, for example, little to no verification of who their customers are, is known to be processing criminal transactions. If you have a customer receiving funds from such an entity over your wire transfers on a weekly basis, that is reason for filing a SAR, and that would fall under your BSA obligations. So here's some statistics for you. When we polled about 100 banks, only 22% of them thought that they could reliably detect cryptocurrency-related payments on their credit card, ACH, and wire transfer systems. We've also been able to show that 8 out of 10 of the top U.S. banks are harboring unregistered cryptocurrency money service businesses. And the reason it's not 10 out of 10 is because 2 of the top 10 are really business and wholesale banks. But if you look at retail banks in the United States, many of them are harboring unregistered, unlicensed money service businesses. And we'll talk about what those look like when we go to some case studies. And when we look at the larger financial institutions, some of them will say, well, you know, there's cryptocurrency, people are buying it, that's fine. As long as they don't do chargebacks, that's fine. We don't have much exposure. But when you actually dig into it and integrate tools like the CipherTrace and Alessa integration, what you find out is that these bigger banks are processing up to $2 billion a year in cryptocurrency payments that they had no visibility to and no idea. So criminals are using crypto to get access to the banking system and launder funds. So there may be funds that are coming from what we call darknet markets. So these are online marketplaces that are hidden through cloaks of anonymity on the Tor network, for example, that facilitate buying and selling of drugs, weapons. There are other systems that facilitate child exploitation materials and human trafficking. There are also, what they tend to do is they will send those funds to what we call a high-risk VASP. So this would be one of these cryptocurrency companies that has poor or non-existent processes for identifying their customers, that does not file SARs, that is not registered perhaps with FinCEN in the United States, but they have a bank account. And so what happens there is they will basically send funds from that bank account to another bank in the United States, and then the criminals can pull that money out or further that money on to another bank where they can pull their funds out in fiat. And this is how the loop works. We do also see your traditional money mules out there as well. So these are people who have bank accounts that either knowingly or unknowingly are being used to funnel criminal cryptocurrency into the banking system. So here's a couple of examples of some money laundering indictments. This one was pretty high profile. It was about 2 months ago. There was an exchange called BitMEX where the Department of Justice and CFTC went after them at the same day and announced a coordinated effort against this exchange. Interestingly, most of the exchange's employees are in the United States. Their executives, many of them live offshore in Hong Kong, and they domiciled the company in Seychelles. And the Seychelles is a jurisdiction, an African jurisdiction that it's easy to register. They have little to no requirements for KYC or anti-money laundering as long as you're not servicing residents of the Seychelles. So we've seen over 70 of these exchanges register in the Seychelles. You'll be seeing articles coming out about this in Fortune and Forbes and another couple of publications that CipherTrace contributed to the research on. But this is one of these places where jurisdictional arbitrage is being used to make an American company look like it's offshore and therefore not have to comply with any of the FinCEN requirements. A couple of these guys, well, all four of the executives have arrest warrants out for their arrest. One of them has already been arrested, and they've been charged with huge fines. This is another example of a recent prosecution. So this MSB pled guilty to laundering $25 million in cash and crypto through U.S. bank accounts. There's another one in Ohio this summer. So this gentleman was running a crypto money laundering service, which was called Helix Mixer. And he had laundered over $300 million through this service and was fined $60 million. Now, this gentleman has a bank account in the United States. So it hasn't been made public who that bank is, but you wouldn't want to be his bank, I would think. And then, of course, we've seen the OFAC sanctions for suspected North Korean operatives who are laundering cryptocurrency through U.S. and European banks. And this is another area I'd like to bring to your attention. I don't know if you have looked at cryptocurrency ATMs, but this market has exploded, and these exchanges are there's so many of them in the United States. I would say it's doubling every year. So there's about 8,000 of these cryptocurrency ATMs in the United States and Europe. Last year there was 4,000, the year before 2,000, the year before that 1,000. So it's doubling every year, and their AML procedures can be woefully lacking. And you want to make sure that if you are banking one of these ATM companies, you know it, and that you have vetted their AML capabilities, and that they are compliant with BSA recommendations as far as being a money service business. Here's another example of a recent enforcement this year. So the OCC charged MY Safra Bank for providing banking services to cryptocurrency companies and high-risk cryptocurrency companies, and not investigating whether those companies were actually performing their requirements for money service businesses. So their customers were exchanges, these ATM companies that we spoke about, various trading companies, a number of developers of blockchain projects such as distributed exchanges, some incubators that were involved in facilitating ICOs, and a bunch of other money service businesses. So you want to make sure that you don't fall into this type of situation. Let's just look very briefly at the fellow who was indicted in laundering over $300 million of Bitcoin. He was indicted for money laundering, operating an MSB, or a money transmitting business, without a license. And he was facilitating mostly drugs trafficking through an exchange, which is one of these dark markets called Alpha Bay. All right, so let's dive into how this all applies to you. On the FinCEN side of things, of course, when you detect a money service business or a P2P exchanger that is involved with your bank, you need to know that that's who it is. So is this an MSB? Is it a P2P exchanger? And then perform your due diligence around that customer. And many of these customers will lie to you about account creation, what the nature of their business is, and I'll show you later in a case study how you can detect it and some examples of it. When you're doing transaction monitoring, which everybody does today as far as their payments traffic go, you need to understand, of course, for every payment, is the source of the payment suspicious or risky? So if those payments are known to be correlated with virtual assets, you need to do your regular screening around how often are these payments, does it look like structuring or layering, but also what is the nature of where that money is coming from or going to? Is it from a VASP? Is that an unlicensed VASP? Is it a money service business within the US or not within the US that is unlicensed? And then these are the types of things that you will want to investigate and file suspicious activity reports for. What FinCEN is going to be asking you to be able to answer, are there virtual currency related transactions going through your accounts? So not only do you bank virtual currency companies directly, but do you have funds flowing through your accounts? Are any of these unregistered person-to-person or peer-to-peer exchanges Do you know if these are money service businesses or are they kiosks/ATMs? They're going to ask you if they're valid transactions. So could these be money laundering transactions? Could they be ways for sanctioned entities to gain access to the US banking system by having crypto and then moving it to one of these exchanges and moving it into bank accounts in the United States? And you have to show that you can develop, document, and demonstrate compliance with the regulations as far as tracking how virtual currencies could be involved with your customers and with your bank. So I've summarized it here. So this is the summary page. But these are what you're going to have to come back to FinCEN with and what you will be asked when auditors want to see how you're complying. I would recommend, if you have interest in the topic, to do a quick Google for the FinCEN virtual currency red flags. This is a document that FinCEN published a couple of months ago. It's easy to read. It really is very clear, and as an AML professional, you'll read through it and go, oh yeah, this is all the stuff we do today, but you have to apply it to if customers are using virtual currencies and understanding who the counterparties are, where that money's coming from and going to. So there's a number of red flags in there. For example, you want to be avoiding supporting transactions for unregistered peer-to-peer exchanges. You need to be able to understand if these are foreign located money service businesses and are they registered with FinCEN because they're clearly servicing US customers? Are they ATMs, etc.? So it's a great document to take a read of. Now, what do you do when you find one of these suspicious activities happening on your payment networks? Well, when you file a suspicious activity report, FinCEN is asking you to use this keyword in your SARS so that they can search for it easily and understand that it's related to virtual currency. So this is the term, the CVC FIN 2019 A003, that you want to put in your suspicious activity reports if it's related to someone using virtual currencies. So this is an example of if someone is operating a peer-to-peer exchange using one of your consumer or business accounts, you're going to see things like, cash deposits or wire transfers that are used effectively to buy these virtual currencies. You may see a bunch of deposits that come in from different locations. We're going to see in a case example here in a few minutes, a financial institution that found one of these P2P exchangers on their accounts, and it was actually facilitating walk-up cash deposits around the United States that were proceeds of drugs and human trafficking. And you want to also scan if contact information is connected with a VASP. So for example, when you're doing screening of customers, you want to be able to see if they are related to beneficial owners of one of these virtual asset service providers, which may indicate that you may be inadvertently providing banking services to one of these companies. And you want to be able to file SARS again using the same term here that FinCEN would like you to use for potentially illicit activities. So are these unregistered foreign exchanges, or are they VASPs in high-risk jurisdictions or that are known to be high risk? So you don't just have to say, oh, well, it's in this jurisdiction, it's bad because of that. But if you look into the data that is provided by CipherTrace and in the Alessa system, you will be able to see, okay, that virtual asset service provider is high risk. So there's a risk score associated with these different counterparties. And then lastly, you do want to make sure that you understand these virtual currency kiosks, or as I call them, Bitcoin ATMs. you want to see if that customer is operating them. Now, some of these customers can be very small. So you might just purchase one ATM machine, or you might be a large operator who runs hundreds and hundreds of them around the country. We know of one who has 150 ATMs, half of them in the United States and half of them in Colombia, South America. So you can draw your own conclusions as to what they're being used for. Because what we find is with some of these ATMs, they're very clean. They work with companies like CipherTrace or others to perform their anti-money laundering and KYC requirements, and some of them do not. So you will find some of these machines that will allow you to transact thousands of dollars per day with no identity information. There's no verification. You don't have an account number. You can walk up and deposit thousands of dollars a day or retrieve thousands of dollars a day out of them without any identification, verification, or any account information. If you want to, for example, move $20,000 a day, you might want to break it up into several transactions, and it will sometimes, some of these things, they take a photograph of your ID, so you hold your fake ID up, and then some of them will want to text you, so you have your $10 burner phone that you just picked up at 7-Eleven. They will text you a text message, and this is their idea of KYC. You do want to understand if you are inadvertently banking one of these customers, are they ones who are good and clean and who are obeying by the regulations, or are they not? So another thing that we talked about is, are these virtual asset service providers risky? And what we did at CipherTrace, we released a report that you can get for free at CipherTrace.com in October, where we surveyed over 800 of these cryptocurrency virtual asset service providers and evaluated their KYC procedures. So we categorized them as green would be strong, so it's what you would expect if someone were to open an online bank account or an online stock trading account, so proof of identity, verification of address, that type of thing. Some of them are red, so we found that quite a large percentage in every region are red, meaning they have little to no KYC. Some of these are as simple as you provide an email address and you can start moving money. Some of them, you don't even have to provide an email address. So some of these DeFi platforms, there is zero KYC at all. And then the yellow are what we call porous, which means there are companies that, for example, would let you transact 2 Bitcoins a day with no identity information. So at today's market rates, that would be about $38,000 per day with no identity information. And then above that, you have to provide identity. So that's what we would call porous. So you can see here that overall in the world, about 56% of these cryptocurrency VASPs have weak or porous KYC. So these are the ones you want to be careful of if you have a customer receiving or sending funds to these in any kind of volume, either large transfers or repeat transfers. This is where you need to be focusing. So when you get audited, these explanations won't work. So it's not okay to say you don't do crypto because your customers are doing it. And I think saying, oh, we know all our customers, that's an internet business. That doesn't work either, because what we found is these illegal MSBs or illicit MSBs, they don't tell you what they're really doing. We know of some of these businesses that will have 30 different bank accounts, and none of them actually say that they're a cryptocurrency company, and they maintain many bank accounts because if one of them gets shut down, they can activate the other ones and start moving money there. I mentioned the Financial Action Task Force. This is, as I mentioned, it's a group that supports over 190 regulators with AML and KYC recommendations, and they have a virtual asset working group, which CipherTrace is a member of, or one of the few commercial companies that works very closely with the FATF on current regulations and future regulations in the space. I would recommend you take a look at, do a Google on FATF virtual assets. You will find a number of really useful documents that can help you understand the space, understand the regulations, and understand where it's going. They also have a red flags indicators document, which came out a couple of months ago. That's a good one to augment what you will learn from reading the FinCEN red flags. So Google for that. So these are going to be your typical behaviors. So for anyone who's in the, an AML and compliance business, you'll be familiar with this for other types of transactions, but, are people converting lots of fiat into virtual assets and you don't know why? So if your customer's sending large amounts of money to one of these cryptocurrency companies on a repeat basis, and it's really inconsistent with who the customer is or their typical behavior, the amounts of money they send, then you might want to take a look at that. Obviously, if it's a peer-to-peer exchanger, you need to be careful about that. We are now seeing the issuance of Visa and MasterCards tied to cryptocurrency accounts. So this is a new area of interest to figure out, is that a credit card that is linked to Binance or to Coinbase, for example, or BitGo. These are some of the companies that are now issuing debit cards tied to cryptocurrencies. So I'd like to do a couple of case studies and then leave some time for Q&A. So the first case study here is, this is a operator of a cryptocurrency ATM, and he was charged with running an unlicensed exchange. He's pled guilty to 4 felonies. So this was really being used for pretty much drugs trafficking and for people to buy and sell narcotics through his systems. He didn't have any AML, and he had active bank accounts at cryptocurrency companies like Local Bitcoins and Gemini, but also at banks including Wells Fargo and Ally Financial. And he was basically taking funds from these dark marketplaces where drugs are bought and sold, and then monetizing it through his bank accounts to convert it into US dollars. So that's one case study. I'd like to take a look at a second one. Now, this is a case study of looking at a money service business operating at a bank. So in this case, CipherTrace identified a number of bank accounts that are being used by these P2P exchangers. And so the bank then was, so this is what these things look like on these P2P crypto exchanges, is they're offering to buy and sell crypto through bank accounts. So now, when the bank dove into this particular account, they could find that it was a business account. It was created with one of these online services where you can create a business account for a few $100s. There's no real verification of who the people are or their true beneficial ownership. They were then able to get a corporate account at the bank, and then investigation of that account here, you can see they were doing almost daily walk-up cash deposits across multiple branches, and in total there would be less than about $6,000 a day, but they were doing it 5 days a week. So this was a money laundering operation really related to narcotics and sex trafficking. And once they implemented the CipherTrace system, they discovered that they would have up to 70 of these per month operating off their bank accounts, and they were able to see a 67% reduction. And as they get into better automation on their back-end systems, on their compliance and AML systems, we anticipate we'll probably see a 95% reduction in this type of traffic on their accounts. So What you can do on this case study is how you do it is you get personal data feed from CipherTrace through Alessa. You can map account numbers, look at transaction details, file the SARs, and take remedial action. The other thing that's interesting about it is when you find one of these, you'll often find they're related to other accounts in your bank. We had one last week where we figured out that the customer was operating crypto businesses through Cyprus and Russia, and they had 150 related accounts at the bank. The tools also can help you with onboarding. So is the customer operating a P2P exchange? Is it a business that is telling you it's an internet business? I sell rugs on the internet, but really it's a virtual asset service provider. So you're going to get asked about all of that. What are your controls? Can you identify peer-to-peer transactions? And do you have the tools you need? So this is how it looks in the Alessa interface. There's some really cool tools here for looking at a crypto exchange, figuring out if customers are interacting with it and sending money or receiving money to or from it on your bank accounts or credit cards. You can get their KYC scores, their overall risk scores, see how much of their transactions are high risk and criminal. So this is helpful in filing your SARs.
So on behalf of the team at Alessa and CipherTrace, I'd like to thank Dave for today's presentation. I hope you really were able to sort of understand what are FinCEN's regulations and your obligations. And because I'm sure next year there's going to be a lot more movement in this space. So being prepared is a good thing. So on behalf of Team Alessa and CipherTrace, I'd like to wish everyone all the best for the holiday season. And we will see you in 2021. With that, I'd like to conclude the presentation.